Okay, this is a quick lecture on the Greater Romantic Lyric, which we've already read a couple Greater Romantic Lyric poems, Frost at Midnight and This Lime Tree Bower My Prison, and we have like one of the biggest Greater Romantic Lyric poems coming up in Tintern Abbey. The literary scholar M.H. Abrams first comes up with the idea and the description and analysis of this kind of poem in an article called Structure and Style in the Greater Romantic Lyric. And many of the following descriptions in the next slides are going to come from his article. You do not need to write this down. You do not need to remember this. I will never, on any quiz or exam, ask you, like, who is M.H. Abrams? But I just want you to know that he is the scholar who first called the poems this, and that a lot of these ideas come from his article. Like, I want to give him credit for his ideas. Sometimes these poems are also called romantic conversation poems because it sometimes feels like a person is talking to another person. So, what are the elements of a greater romantic lyric? And I've just uh, shortened it right there. The first element is that there is what they call a determinate speaker, a specific speaker, more than just a generic like I of a lyric poem. If you think about Frost at Midnight, this is a very kind of like specific person. It's not just any guy. Second element is a specific, now it is often outdoors, but it doesn't have to be setting, or the speaker is looking at something like really specific. Not just any tree, but like this tree, this willow tree in winter, and this thing is happening to it right now. Like it's specific. And we overhear the speaker talking either to himself, and it is always himself, or a relatively silent human listener who could be present or could be absent. Think about like this Lime Tree Bower My Prison, where the speaker is talking to his friend Charles, but his friend Charles is actually on the hike. So but talking to someone else. So those are the elements. The other thing to really note are the stages. And so you should have written down the elements, and you should definitely write down the stages in your notes. The stages of a greater romantic lyric. It will start with description, describing that specific setting, that specific landscape. And in the act of describing that, basically, the speaker will, they'll have a thought, or there'll be a memory, or they'll think about the future, or they'll have a kind of feeling of some kind. A mental process. This sparks a mental process. And remember, we've talked about how a lot of these poems, even though they're about a landscape, it's really about what's going on in the poet's mind. In the process of this thought, the speaker, and this is quoting from Abrams' article, achieves an insight, faces up to a tragic loss, comes to a moral decision, or resolves an emotional problem. And then this last stage is incredibly important. We end basically where we began, like we're back in our specific setting. But the speaker has reached a higher level of understanding as a result of everything that happened in parts 2 and 3. So we may end at the same place, but the speaker is perhaps wiser than before, or has made a decision of some kind. So those are the stages. Those are very important. Okay, we have already read this poem, so it's going to be kind of easier for you to see how this works in action. Think about Frost at Midnight. We have our elements, a very specific speaker, right? It's not just any guy. It's like we know he's a father. We know he has this little baby. We know he lives in a cottage. We know it's winter. So it's very specific. And then we have the specific setting, right? We have the cottage in winter. And we have our silent listener, the baby, right? The baby is there, and it's kind of, and at one point, right, the speaker even says, like, thou, right? Like, you are going to have like a different life, right? He even like addresses the child specifically. So we have all of our elements. We also have all of our stages, right? That first stanza of the poem describes the cottage and the situation, and we get, the frost and the icicles and the wind and the fire in the grate, all that stuff. Then we have thought, right? We get the comparison of the ash fluttering in the grate, and the speaker's mind is just going, and he has a memory, right? He remembers his childhood in the city and kind of like how unhappy he was. This sparks an insight. He realizes he doesn't want his child to grow up without nature like he did. He wants his child to learn by roaming free in nature. And then we return, right? We come back to where we started at the end. We're back with like the he's not thinking about his baby in the future as a child. We're back with the baby. We're the frost, the icicles, and right, the speaker has that blessing for his child to love all, like, therefore, let every season be sweet to thee, right? The blessing for his child to love all of nature and love every season. And this lime tree bower, my prison, right? Like I talked a little bit about that, but this, if you walked through it, it would follow all of these things as well, right? It has all the elements, it follows all the stages, and so hopefully this helps prepare you guys to go through the biggest, most representative romantic conversation poem, Tintern Abbey by Wordsworth. So we'll talk about this in class. Thanks.